I accidentally flipped the video off instead of putting it on pause for a second. So that's how we got to 2 videos. The other side of this story was that some of the students in the class really, if you will recall, argued pretty vehemently that microaggressions, especially the ones that were unintended, that people were just being overly sensitive, and that if we were going to use individuals' ideas of sensitivity to judge what everybody but that individual could say around them, everybody has different sensitivities, right? And we were talking about triggers and that sort of thing, and some people feel like we're overly sensitive and we shouldn't. I think that's also been called the victim mentality, and we shouldn't be encouraging the victim mentality. So I don't really want to rehash that argument of one being right and one being wrong. I want to say 2 things. The first thing I want to say is I gave you those examples because these are the kind of conversations that students have every year, but in every semester actually, but in the past, students have just accepted that I think one thing, you think another thing, that person thinks a third thing, that person has their own opinion, and they've been okay with that. But I have noticed over the past couple of semesters that students are more and more, certain students perhaps, are adamant that their perspective is right. Not that there's room for people to disagree, but that there is one right way to look at this. And a couple of things happen when students begin insisting that their way is right. Many students don't like conflict, and so they just pull out of the discussion. And I've seen that happen in our room this semester too, which makes me sad. But actually I've seen it before, and that's how come we have the written reflections, because then that doesn't happen. And I do have those, even though it means a lot more reading and grading and stuff, because it gives people a chance to talk who maybe do not want to disagree publicly with someone. And the other thing it does is it takes people who don't want to take an extreme view, this is wrong or this is right, don't want to take an extreme view, and makes them just want to walk away from the conversation altogether. And I've also noticed some of that in class. And I don't know if you've noticed, but over the course of the semester, and I've been thinking a lot about what I could have done differently, because as I said, the semesters are changing. I didn't used to have this problem to this degree. And so when I see that there are trends, I don't necessarily think that my teaching has changed. I think that it might be, but I think that nevertheless, I have to start thinking about how to change my teaching so that everybody feels like they're comfortable participating in these discussions. And I don't want our class to be a class where just a few people over and over again tend to be the only ones who talk because they're strident in their views. And I'm not insulting anyone for having strong opinions. Believe me, I'm not. I have certain opinions about which I'm very strong. But what I am concerned about, and this gets me to my second point, I am very concerned that there are a lot of societal problems in the world that we are never going to solve if we dig our heels in about what's right and what's wrong, about how we deal with these things, how we approach them, what the right way of saying things are, what the right way of doing things is, what the right belief set to have is. The more we insist that we're right, the more we not only polarize ourselves, but we ensure that we're not going to have good cross-idea dialogue. We're not going to be able to talk out things and work towards a solution. So when I decided to just can the exam, I did it with the idea that we would spend today, which I'm sorry I'm sick and we're not in the classroom together, but we would spend today and Wednesday trying to practice a skill set that I think is critical, just critical, for us to be able to actually move forward. And those of you who've had my 160 class, which some of you have, most of you haven't, but you know that when but if you did, we practice something called active listening. And I think active listening is particularly important right now. Active listening is a decision to try to understand somebody else's point of view without foregoing your own point of view, without having to agree with them, without making them feel bad about what they believe if you believe differently. It's only about understanding. And as I see us becoming more competitive in presenting our own opinions, I know that we are, unless we actually go back and learn these skills, we are losing out on our opportunities to get to know each other. Now, why is it so important to understand what other people think, even if we think they're just dead wrong? Well, because most of the social problems that we have cannot be resolved by ourselves. One person or even one church full of people or one organization full of people cannot fix the really overwhelming, systemically, embedded problems that we have. We have to work with other people who are also part of the system. And to do that, we're working with groups that are different than we are. And they have to like working with us, which means we have to be respectful of them. It doesn't mean we have to agree with everything they think or say or do, but we absolutely have to be respectful of them. And being respectful doesn't mean arguing that you're always right. Being respectful means trying to understand where they're coming from. And then we have to look for areas of common ground. And once we find the areas of common ground, we can just agree for the time being, not to focus on all the things where we have disagreement, but to try to move forward around things that we have common ground. Or if it's not a situation where there's kind of like a Venn diagram where we can all find something we can agree to work on, then what we have to do is we have to dig even deeper into not just what people say they want, but why they want it. What are they hoping to accomplish? What are their values that they're trying to preserve? I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head, and I'm having a hard time, probably because I'm not feeling that great, but we may come in to an argument or a negotiation or, excuse me, even just something going on with our roommates, and we may know how we want it. We want this person to do that, and that to be cleaned up in this way, and this to be moved over there. And the thing is, we come in, and if we just dig our heels in, and we're not going to let it go until we get those three things the way we want them, then if everybody does that, then nothing's ever going to be settled. But if we can talk it out, why is it that I want to move that over there? Well, because I'm always on the other side of the room when I use it, and I need to be on the other side of the room because that is where the outlet is, and whatever. Oh, well, okay. So it's not really that you want that thing over there. It's that you want that thing and your workspace to be in the same area. What if we got what if we got an extension cord so that you could stay in this area over here where everything's all set up, so we don't have to start moving everything around. So maybe the other person didn't want to do that, not because they didn't even like the idea, but because they didn't want to move everything around because it takes too much time and it upsets everything, and the house is going to be all upside down when you do that. It kind of reminds me of the old mediation story. I don't think I have an orange over here. I have a tangerine. Yeah, there's a mediation story that two people were arguing over an orange. And the mediator came along and said, well, what's going on here? And they said, I want the orange. No, I want the orange. I need the orange. I need the orange just as badly. So the mediator starts digging. That's the position, right? I get the orange. The mediator starts digging a little bit and finds out that the one person wanted the orange to squeeze the orange for the juice. The other person wanted the orange because they wanted to peel the rind and use the rind in a dish that they were making. They were going to zest the rind. And once they figured out exactly what they needed it for, they were able to actually split the orange and give the part that one person wanted to that person and give the other part to the other person. It's not always that simple. But my point is, if all you do is walk in with your position, I want the orange, then you're going to be like this. One of us is going to get the orange and the other one's going to lose it, right? But if you can get down into the weeds a little bit and try to understand where somebody's coming from, what it is they're trying to preserve for themselves or their family or their community, then you might be able to come up with a solution that they didn't walk in the room thinking of, but that would still preserve all those things for them without creating problems for somebody else. And the very, very first step to all of that kind of stuff is really excellent listening skills. So this is what we're going to be doing. I am going to start by having you listen not to each other, but to some people on tape. And I'm going to ask you to suspend your urge to disagree or agree with these people, but instead to use your powers of thought and your listening skills to be looking for a few things. What are they saying they want? What seems to be their motives? What is the context or the background? And I'll write all this down for you. The context or the background that out of which all this comes. What do they seem to be feeling? And really what I want you to do is just be open to trying to understand where they're at. You don't have to agree with them. And you will see that I have pulled in a couple of things that you've already seen and a couple of new things. And all I want you to do is practice thinking about, listening to, and understanding where somebody else is coming from. You absolutely do not have to, you don't have to agree with them. All you are striving to do is to understand them. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to count this both as today's class day and as the quiz. And you will see that as you go through, I've set this up as an exam where you have to do one part before you do the next part, before it shows you the next part. And by the end of this, we will have prepped ourselves for what we're going to do together on Wednesday. This is worth both the points for the quiz and the points for the class. So that's a lot of points. And so I hope that you will stick with it and get all this done before Wednesday at 2. Wednesday at 2, whenever the quizzes are due. All right, that is it. And I'll leave you here so that we can go to the next thing.